Hi, my name is Jackie, and I'm doing a study on Marilyn Monroe. And in studying the story of Marilyn Monroe, I just look at random clippings and some internet information. I wish I have all the time to read up more books, but I'm also afraid that it will always be tainted anyway. So I'm just kind of like praying about exactly why I am so drawn to the story of Marilyn Monroe and in particular, her biography. It wasn't so much how she's on film, but her biography and some of the recordings that she has personally done where I could hear her and have a sense of what she is like. And um, being that kind of person where a lot of people had come to me from the time I was even younger and tell me all their problems, I kind of have this feeling about Marilyn Monroe as being a person that had a real soul. She wasn't just as shallow as everybody wanted her to be. She actually, wanted. She was fighting for equality. Um, she loved Ella Fitzgerald, and just in the last few months, I had fallen in love with Ella Fitzgerald's voice and her her life. And I'm trying to I am not crazy over uh, actors and celebrities. I really could care less about them. However, there are certain ones that sort of draws me to them. And it's usually these older singers. For some odd reason, it's like there's something about how they did their art and their songs that I'm so still sort of like feel like I'm still there. They're still here for me. So with Marilyn Monroe, the more I looked at some of the things she's done, what was said about her, I kind of came into a conclusion that perhaps I was very drawn to her story, not simply because she was a beautiful, gorgeous woman, but rather because I had to deal with a mother who was a lot, had similarities with her, very charming. My mother had this charm that even when she was heavy set, people gravitated toward her. And I used to wonder, like, my gosh, my mom seemed to, she could get away with anything, because people just loved her. But she was very frank, very frank. It was not like a Marilyn Monroe. She was very frank. And she loves to sing, and she sings sort of operatic. And even when she and when she's happy, it's like she pulls everybody's emotion. And when she's sad, everybody's so sad. And that's what you call charisma. And so I learned to be very careful with people who are very charismatic. And every now and then I meet these people that have this very, like, it's like they're very emotional. And other people, if they love you, oh great. If they don't love you, if they don't like you, oh heaven forbid. May God help you. And that was my mother, and I'm trying to. I can kind of see a bit of my mom when I see Marilyn Monroe, because my mother had a stature. She was something back in her province. She grew up with parents who were politicians. Her brother was in a mayor. Her mother was a mayor. They owned property. And it doesn't mean a whole lot now, because most of those properties end up with the tenants, and it's, we, most of the cousins are pretty, we're self-sufficient, so we don't try to hurt people just because we inherited properties. It's not, it's not worth, you know, giving people so much of a hard time, so to speak. So we try to be as civil and as reasonable with everybody, but at the same time, I wish people would give a little bit more respect to my cousins. So I I'm trying to. Here's this Marilyn Monroe. What is it about her that I am so drawn to know more? It's like I was watching her every move and trying to understand her as though she's still alive today. And obviously she shouldn't be. She isn't. And I think it's just like there's something about her that draws compassion. It draws this sort of look at me. Oh, I how do I look? I'm beautiful, ain't I? And she's kind of has this beauty that you fall in love with. You fall in love with the beauty, and there's that sensitive, vulnerable, or you at least assume there's a sensitive, vulnerable person inside there, and how she had died. Now, with her being questionably, whether she killed herself is very likely because of the past history, but yet again, they couldn't fully rule out that she was murdered. And I feel a bit conflicted with this because I tried to figure out, okay, here's a woman who is so gorgeous, and she created Norma Jean Baker created Marilyn Monroe. And I sort of, from looking at some of the voice that, expressions and interviews, she was so happy to give people interviews of her. And she wanted to. She actually would call for somebody to interview her. She had a favorite photographer. She also kept, her maid. Now, here's the fact that I'm a bit I'm really conflicted with. Supposedly, one of the YouTube videos stated that more or less she committed suicide because it seems more consistent to what had happened. Although something about it I don't completely buy, and it could just be me. But also there is this maid, and I put the question, where is she now, and what does this woman could say about Marilyn Monroe? And sure enough, Pepitone, this woman, she has not just been a maid for Marilyn Monroe, but this is a woman who had cooked for many celebrities as well. And she didn't speak a whole lot of English, but it didn't seem like the book that she was involved with didn't seem to have, as a lot of people didn't find it credible, and it also painted a negative light upon Marilyn Monroe. And it was kind of showing how, she had body odor, and this very, very private things that really, in someone's private home, I mean, it's very different. I mean, we don't walk outside how we are inside our home. So what I was concerned there is that this person didn't seem to be a very nice person, whoever that maid is. And I know she was the one who had discovered Marilyn Monroe, technically. And, she was also with the doctor who had examined Marilyn Monroe. Now, the coroner also made statements that, could allude to the fact that it could have been a murder, because they said that the stomach did not contain barbiturate. However, her descending colon did. And I didn't see anything firsthand, so I'm going to leave it up. I just know that I feel sort of touched by her story, so much so that I have to make this video. And there is nothing I can do. The woman is gone. The maid is gone. But yet, this is still an unsolved mystery. And the only people that could probably perhaps care are the people who became her fans, because there's no real family involvement at this point. The mystery of her death, I don't believe will always be a mystery. I just personally believe that, because I have a grandfather, and my grandfather was murdered, and it took many years, and eventually we had found out that more or less who killed my grandfather is pretty much Um, I'm not saying Marilyn Monroe's maid did it, but in my grandfather's case, it was a situation where my grandfather had a cook, and the cook was so good that my grandfather paid for his wedding, and my grandfather also sort of took care of his children. In fact, he kept that cook so close to his residence that he gave him a pot of land. I mean, like, where he could have his house and everything, and his children can grow up there, and then they can visit him as often as possible. And so, you know, it's been a tradition in the family that if we've had somebody who took care of us for so long and is a trusted servant, that eventually you give them a piece of land and you help them with their education and you help the education of their children. And that's what my grandfather was good at. However, this cook had one good son and one bad son, and the one bad son, it's kind of like he is quote unquote always asked my grandfather for money, and he knew that my grandfather had come from the bank. And when he came back, this man was perhaps asking for money, and when he wasn't granted any money to be loaned or for whatever reason, he has knocked him on his forehead, and my grandfather fell backwards. And this is part of the investigation that I've known from the time I was 8. And then I'm just putting the pieces together because that's what I did when I came back to the Philippines. I kind of wanted to know the truth, and I had to ask around. Well, it turns out this family that had lived next to that particular house of my grandfather, the good son who we trusted, and his name is Simon. The brother's name is Elpidio. This Simon is the good son. Him and his mother eventually moved out of the town because the mother said at the moment my grandfather died, her other son Elpidio never came back home. And it was believed that he had joined some paramilitary up in the boondocks, and we never really had any justice for my grandfather. We sort of just ended the investigation, and my one aunt moved into that house that was empty, and my cousin raised his family in that house. And ever since that family moved into that house, this servant and the mother and the son had left to another town, but made a confession that she was very concerned as to why her own son never came back home the moment my grandfather had died. And so there's a strong tendency that he is, although my father never had real justice, this man eventually had been went to the paramilitary, like a guerrilla, and he lived that life, and then eventually he ended up in jail and died. But then again, I never got to interview this person. This is just what I've been hearing as when I came back to the Philippines. So it took many years. It took technically 18 years, perhaps, before I could clear some things out and remove the cobwebs. So I sure hope that there will be a resolution, and the truth will come out about Marilyn Monroe's death. So and I'm not saying that the stories are very different. So more or less, she could have really killed herself, but it's also very possible that Marilyn Monroe was murdered. In my grandfather's case, he was definitely murdered. In Marilyn Monroe's case, I don't know. But her mystery is something that I am very fascinated with because of my own personal attachment and recognition of my grandfather's death, and how we found out the truth. So thank you very much.